Campaign 2010 Gubernatorial Debate. Now your moderator, Angela Kennecke.
Good evening. Next week, South Dakota voters will elect a new governor. Before you head to the polls, we want to help you get to know the candidates. Republican Dennis Dugard and Democrat Scott Heideprim will spend the next hour answering your questions. The Lieutenant Governor and Senate Minority Leader each have 1 minute for opening statements. Then we'll begin a free-flowing conversation with no time restrictions. I do want to warn you, however, I may interrupt to make sure the candidates stay on track or if it's time for a commercial break. At the end of the hour, there'll be 1 minute each for closing statements. And we did flip a coin to decide who will speak first. We'll start with Scott Heideprim. You have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Well, thank you, Angela. I really appreciate the chance to be here. Oftentimes in these forums, Dennis and I have started by telling you a little about our growing up in rural South Dakota. Dennis outside of Garrettson, me in Miller. You have a story just like that too. I know that you do. All South Dakotans do. But tonight we aren't here to talk about the past. We're here to talk about the future. We're here to talk about priorities that each of us have that are very, very different in nature. You should be aware of the difference in priorities between the Lieutenant Governor and myself in making your decision about who to support. The Lieutenant Governor supports the size of state government in its current form. I think it's too big. He supports a $10.5 million refund to an out-of-country oil company. I don't. He supports maintaining 3 airplanes just for the executive. I don't. I believe in roads and bridges and kids and schools, and those are the priorities that I'll fight for as the next governor of South Dakota. Thanks again.
Dennis Dugard.
Thanks for having me tonight. South Dakota's next governor must have the first priority economic development and job creation. Over 6 months ago, I released a jobs plan with over 40 ideas how to jumpstart the economy in South Dakota. We do face budget challenges, not as a consequence of mismanagement, but because of the national recession, which has driven our tax revenues down and our Medicaid claims up. Still, South Dakota is among the best states in the nation in terms of our budget and in terms of our economic conditions. The legislature in the last legislative session balanced the budget without raising taxes and without using any reserves. Our reserves today stand at $107 million, a little bit more than when Governor Rounds and I took office. As governor, I will cut our budget, make the hard choices, and do what's necessary to make our budget whole. I have the experience to do it, and I'm ready to do it. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this forum, and I look forward to the questions.
Well, nearly 150 viewers sent in their questions. One common theme among them is the state budget. Our first question comes from Scott. He wants to know how you tackle South Dakota's budget deficit without raising taxes. And Marlene, in conjunction with this, wants to know specifics on how you'll deal with the more than $100 million budget shortfall and how you'll get the legislature to support any cuts that you suggest. So it's a twofold question. How do you deal with the budget without raising taxes? What do you do about the shortfall and get the legislature to support your ideas?
Well, Dennis, first of all, I want you to know that I'm not the Scott who asked that question. Although you might have suspected that because it's what I've spent an awful lot of time in this campaign talking about. And in fact, Angela, I've been very specific about exactly what I'm going to do about the deficit. My opponent doesn't even agree that it's a crisis. Everyone else running for governor has agreed. $107 million in just 1 year is a huge budget hole. It represents 9% of our entire revenue stream. So here's what I've said we should do. It's a plan, by the way, that had bipartisan support until this administration opposed it. We were going to reduce the size of government 2 to 3%, saving $10 to $20 million. We were going to eliminate the tax break for TransCanada, which is $10.5 million. We were going to reduce something called phantom FTEs to bring in $6.7 million. We had a number of other reductions in place which would have realized $40 million. Had we just reduced the nut that is state government by that much, it would have really reduced the challenge we face going forward. I'm anxious to hear the Lieutenant Governor's ideas about specifically how he would reduce those budget choices.
Well, it's interesting. I did not hear Senator Heideprim suggest any specifics on cutting the budget. I will say that the budget we're talking about is a budget that begins next July 1. Next July 1, about 8 months from now. Governor Rounds has asked every agency in state government to identify up to 10% in cuts that each agency could offer. I want to look at those cuts, participate with the legislature, and decide the prioritization that must occur. I believe that the next governor must make significant cuts. I'm ready to do that. I've done that in my job at Children's Home Society. When I first took Children's Home Society, first became associated with them, they had significant debt. They had spent their reserves down. I got on the Finance Committee. I took them out of debt. I balanced their budget and built their reserves up to $32 million, reserves and endowment. I know I have what it takes to make the tough decisions, and I'll do it. Everything is on the table.
Angela, you know, if Dennis succeeded in reducing the budget deficit at Children's Home Society, and he did it specifically, why can't he tell us how he's going to do that with the state of South Dakota?
How do you answer that question?
Again, everything is on the table. I have not excluded anything, and I'd ask the same question of Senator Heideprem. Most of his suggested ideas are political attacks, and I'd like to look at serious ideas to balance the budget. The agencies are going to come up with them, and I think it's only responsible to look at those cuts, consider them, visit with the legislature, and identify the cuts that must be made and the priorities that must be taken.
You say that the governor telling the agencies to come up with 10% proposals is responsible. We proposed 2 to 3%, and you ruled that out in the last legislative session. Now, to say that a $10.5 million tax break for a foreign oil company is a political attack, it is probably the worst decision I have seen South Dakota make in my 12 years as a legislator. To take $10.5 million in a year when education got no increase, state employees got no increase, Medicaid providers got no increase, but a foreign oil company got $10.5 million for running a crude oil pipeline from North Dakota to Nebraska. They had to come through South Dakota anyway, at a time when neither North Dakota nor Nebraska offered them a nickel in incentives. That, to me, is irresponsible.
Again, Senator Heideprem has offered nothing in the way of specifics in terms of where he'll cut. He reverts to the Hyperion, or rather the Trans-Canada Pipeline argument. He knows full well that the large project tax refund program has been on the books for years and years. It was this year that Governor Rounds proposed to cut that refund back. Now, it was not eliminated entirely, but phased out because a number of businesses, Trans-Canada included, had built their plan in dependence on that. They had offered their pipeline and gone to the refineries that could utilize their pipeline capacity and said, here's our business case. This is a one-time refund that was given, and it was cut by $22 million. It was cut, not offered anew. And after it was cut, then we're looking at a one-time refund. Trans-Canada will give $25 million, pay $25 million in annual property taxes. So to seize upon a one-time $10.5 million cut as somehow solving the budget is really not anything more than a political attack.
It's 1/4 of solving the budget, Dennis. It was $10.5 million that you approved of going to a foreign oil company to serve absolutely no legitimate state purpose. No one argues that Trans-Canada needed an incentive to burrow under the ground from North Dakota to Nebraska. No one makes that case. Not even Trans-Canada makes that case. You acknowledge that we could have eliminated it because we did in fact reduce it. Why didn't we just eliminate it and put that money into funding the deficit that our state now faces?
Moving forward to work on this budget, other than the Trans-Canada Pipeline, do you want to address any other specifics of what you would do, either one of you? And you've talked about talking with the state, different departments. We get that. Anything else that you want to mention?
Absolutely. And again, the Lieutenant Governor says it's political. Senator Knudsen and I proposed specifically a 2 to 3% reduction in the size of state government, excluding Medicaid and K-12 education. You say, no, we can't do that. That's too much. You say, oh, just think of how much we'd have to reduce the size of state government. That's the answer, Dennis. That's not the problem. 2 to 3% generates $10 to $20 million in savings, even excluding those categories. Why can't we at least start there?
Well, Senator Heideprem, you forget that what you say, I say, is not necessarily what I said. You're claiming that what Governor Rounds said when he refused an across-the-board cut is what I said. In fact, if you go back and read the newspapers and look at the news accounts, I've always been open to an across-the-board cut. when I say that I'm open to an across-the-board cut, you should pay attention.
Well, Dennis, you're open to everything. Everything. You're open to changing the way we do Valhalla. You're open to changing the number of airplanes. You're open. You just don't take a position. Anyone can say they're open. What are you going to do?
I'll let you respond to that before we move on to the next question.
Well, I thank Senator Heilprin for recognizing that I am open to many things. A good governor is a good listener, and I will listen to ideas. And sometimes I'll make a decision that pleases people. Sometimes I make a decision that won't please people. But I am open to listening, and I am open to an across-the-board cut.
Okay. In the past few years, the state has lost a number of jobs in high-tech fields, as well as the credit card industry and a few manufacturing jobs. Viewers want to know about your plans to bring new jobs to the state. David asks how you would enhance South Dakota's economic opportunities for small